You say, and now he could suddenly, all of a sudden, open up the USMCA. What would the impact be for Canada and for the U.S. if President Trump pulled out of that agreement?
He wants to hurt the American people, and that's exactly what he's doing. That a tariff on Canada is a tax on the American people.
Since August 1st, Canada's trade with the United States has faced its toughest strain in decades, with Canada now among the hardest hit by Trump's latest global tariff measures.
Across the entire country of Canada, is probably closer to 20 million Americans rely on Canada for jobs, and vice versa. We rely on jobs with trade with the U.S., but it's just hurting both countries.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford didn't wait to sound the alarm. Speaking directly to American viewers on CNN, he warned that Trump could end or reopen USMCA with a single signature, years ahead of the scheduled 2026 review. Ford stressed that these tariffs are not just punishing Canadian exporters, they are effectively taxing American consumers. He pointed to recent job losses in the United States. More than 37,000 manufacturing jobs gone since April, the lowest employment level in that sector in 5 years, and $6.2 billion in new costs for the U.S. auto industry. Ford's choice to take this message to U.S. media wasn't just about defending Ontario. It was aimed at building political pressure inside the United States, where the economic fallout is already visible. While Ford has chosen to confront Trump's tariff agenda head-on in the public arena, Prime Minister Mark Carney is taking a different path, one defined by strategic patience and careful calculation.
Of course, the Prime Minister has to weigh all industries, not just the specific industries that are immediately impacted, but has to weigh industries against industries, has to weigh region against region and the unity of the country. Well, I think it's been a very wise and a cohesive approach on behalf of all Canadians.
Prime Minister Mark Carney's response has been deliberate. After the August 1st increase, Ottawa did not announce a fresh round of retaliatory tariffs. Instead, Carney emphasized keeping channels to Washington open and weighing the national interest across all sectors before acting. Carney's calculation rests on the fact that USMCA still shields most of Canada's trade. In June, Royal Bank of Canada data showed that 92% of Canadian exports to the U.S. entered duty-free. The remaining 8%, largely steel, aluminum, and other sensitive products, faced an average tariff of about 30%. Rather than rush into concessions, Carney's team is pursuing market diversification. Trade with the European Union has grown by double digits, exports to the United Kingdom are up, and high-level ministers have been in Mexico to coordinate strategy and avoid the divide-and-conquer approach many in Ottawa expect from Trump in any USMCA renegotiation.
Yes, we're having discussions with the Americans.
Prime Minister Carney wouldn't say when he'll next speak to U.S. President Donald Trump, but Ontario's premier didn't mince words.
What's the general impression of Trump in Canada?
He's probably the most disliked politician in the world in Canada.
Ford and Carney are working toward the same end, protecting Canada's economic position, but their methods could not be more different. Ford speaks in blunt terms, calling Trump the most disliked political figure in Canada and focusing on the American costs of tariffs. Carney stays measured, avoids personal attacks, and times his interventions to maximize leverage at the negotiating table. This dual track, public pressure and quiet diplomacy, has so far kept Canada's response cohesive while signaling to Washington that Ottawa will not fold quickly. The threat of an early USMCA rupture is real. Trump has shown he's willing to move outside established timelines if it strengthens his bargaining position. Yet Canada retains leverage: strategic minerals critical to U.S. manufacturing, energy exports, and a strong agricultural trade. Trump also faces rising consumer prices and job losses at home, which could narrow his room to escalate. The challenge for Canada will be to maintain its stance without closing the door on solutions that serve both sides. The period since August 1st has revealed a high-stakes test of endurance between Washington and Ottawa. Trump is pressing hard with tariffs to force movement. Carney is meeting that pressure with strategic patience, while Ford raises the volume in the U.S. media. how long each side can hold their position, and what political cost Trump is willing to bear will determine whether this standoff ends in a balanced agreement or in a rupture that reshapes North American trade far sooner than planned.
Deadline is just hours away. Canada still has not secured a deal. That means Canada could face a 35% blanket tariff from the U.S. starting tomorrow on products not covered by our free trade deal.
On August 1st, President Trump followed through with his warning. Canada now faces a 35% tariff on goods deemed non-compliant with USMCA. The move was pitched as a power play, a way to punish Canada for dragging its feet on a new trade deal. But when the tariffs landed, something was missing. The most strategically vital sector, Canadian oil, was left untouched. While steel, aluminum, auto parts, and even copper tubing were swept into the new rules, Canada's crude oil exports, which make up 50 to 70% of U.S. oil imports, remained exempt. That's not a small omission. Canada sends over 4 million barrels of oil per day to the U.S., most of it heavy crude, refined in American Midwest facilities. If Trump wanted to hit where it hurts, this wasn't it. This wasn't pure luck. Canada's export profile has been quietly evolving. According to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, over 80% of its exports to the U.S. still fall under USMCA protections. These include not just oil, but natural gas, key food items, and many automotive components produced in joint supply chains. Even in copper, one of Trump's headline targets, the damage was limited. The 50% tariff only applies to semi-finished products like tubes and wiring. Canada, however, mostly exports cathodes, anodes, and concentrates, forms that remain unaffected. In effect, Trump's copper move sounded louder than it actually struck. By shaping its trade flows around what's already USMCA compliant, Canada didn't just survive Trump's tariff spike, it outmaneuvered it.
Does Canada have any leverage in these trade negotiations?
Not much. And you've seen that even though we have probably the most ideal prime minister to be negotiating, the problem is that Canada doesn't have a lot of leverage here, in part because you're dealing with a crazy person, and it's really hard to negotiate crazy.
But then came something more political than economic. Just hours before the deadline, Trump posted on Truth Social, tying trade negotiations to Canada's recognition of Palestinian statehood. Suddenly, the story shifted from tariffs to geopolitics, and Trump framed Canada's position as a reason for rejecting a deal. To outside observers, it looked like the rules were changing mid-game. One day, the issue is trade balance. The next, it's foreign policy. The message to Canada? There may be no clear path to a yes, even if Ottawa were ready to deal. That's why Prime Minister Carney's government didn't rush. As of August 1st, Carney made clear that negotiations could, and should, continue past Trump's deadline. Unlike others, Canada wasn't chasing a signature. It was seeking leverage.
Canada right now, due to its USMCA deal, kind of has a better deal than that already. And so if Canada were to face that 15% tariff across the board, well, that would not be a good deal at all for Canada. And so they're better to take their time and continue to try and effort a deal that will be better for our country.
Trump's administration may have expected panic, but what it got was calculation. Experts like those from the Bank of Canada and CTV's Ottawa Bureau noted that compared to deals signed with South Korea or the EU, both of which now face 15% blanket tariffs, Canada actually retains a stronger position under existing USMCA terms. If Canada had rushed into a copy-paste version of the South Korea deal, it would have risked long-term losses. Instead, Carney is gambling on time. And time, in this case, buys options, not only to negotiate better terms, but to maintain strategic sectors like energy and defense. Trump wants to look tough. The 35% number is big, bold, and headline-friendly. But beneath the surface, the structure of North American trade hasn't shifted overnight. Canada's most essential exports are still flowing. Trump hasn't shut the pipeline. He hasn't touched uranium. He hasn't even disrupted cross-border electricity grids. Canada still has cards. The question isn't whether it can endure the pressure, it's whether Trump has played his strongest hand too early.
The president announced a deal with South Korea, which of course is a key U.S. trading partner, with just 2 days to spare before the deadline.
Along with the 15% tariffs, South Korea will invest $350 billion for investments owned and controlled by the United States.
2 days before his self-imposed August 1st deadline, Donald Trump made his move. He announced a deal with South Korea, a key trading partner, locking in tariffs at 15%. That headline came fast and loud, timed for maximum political impact. But behind the celebration, serious questions piled up. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick claimed South Korea would invest $350 billion into the U.S., and that 90% of profits would benefit Americans, all at Trump's direction. But no legal framework was shown, no enforcement mechanism explained. It echoed Trump's earlier deal with Japan, where flashy promises of $550 billion in investments were quietly walked back to a fraction of that total. And again, the math didn't add up. Just like with Europe, which recently pledged to buy massive volumes of U.S. energy, there's no clear indication whether these countries need that much, or whether the U.S. can even supply it. The numbers sounded big, but their foundation looked paper-thin. Trump's latest announcement, a deal with South Korea, followed the same pattern as his earlier agreements. While Seoul has confirmed steps toward formalizing the agreement, the details remain thin. There's no binding treaty language, no timeline for implementation, no clear enforcement mechanisms. The claimed 90-10 profit split raised eyebrows, especially since it hasn't been officially documented. Trump's model seems clear: stack huge numbers, broadcast them through friendly media, and create the illusion of control. Fox News even claimed that tariffs brought in $150 billion from foreign countries, when in reality, those tariffs are paid by American companies, often passed on to consumers. It's economic theater. The deals look impressive in headlines, but underneath, companies are quietly warning of layoffs, price hikes, and shrinking earnings. The Federal Reserve has now delayed a rate cut, citing uncertainty from these very tariff actions.
With the Americans are ongoing. It's possible that they may not conclude by the 1st of August.
While Trump crafted his South Korea announcement, Canada's position came into focus, and it wasn't what Washington wanted to hear. Prime Minister Mark Carney confirmed that no deal had been reached with the U.S., and that none is expected by the August 1st deadline. Canada's negotiators remain in Washington, but the message was clear: Ottawa will not rush into a bad agreement. Carney described the talks as complex and constructive, emphasizing areas like defense, security, and investment. But he gave no hint that Canada would follow the same path as Europe or Asia. And unlike Trump's announce first, explain later strategy, Canada chose clarity. No deal until the terms truly benefit Canadians. In less than a week, Trump had sealed back-to-back deals with Europe and South Korea, both promoted with billion-dollar promises and patriotic slogans. But Carney's refusal to sign on, even under the pressure of an artificial deadline, exposed a critical flaw in the president's game plan. Trump bet that all allies would fall in line before August 1st. That strategy worked with Brussels and Seoul. But Canada didn't blink. And now, the contrast is striking. While Trump claims to win big, his negotiating partners, from Japan to Europe to Korea, all quietly dispute the terms. Canada, at least, is saying so publicly. This isn't just about one missed deal. With each flashy but shallow agreement, Trump is creating economic confusion. The uncertainty has already caused the Fed to hold back, while businesses brace for cost shocks. And if Canada continues to resist, the White House may soon respond with steep tariffs, potentially up to 35% on Canadian goods. That would hit cross-border trade hard. And unlike Japan or South Korea, Canada has signaled it won't be bullied into submission. In the final hours before Trump's August 1st deadline, the scoreboard isn't as clean as the headlines suggest. The deals with Europe and South Korea look rushed, vague, and politically tailored. But Canada's delay may prove the most strategic move yet. Carney isn't just negotiating. He's calling out the game. And now, all eyes turn to August 1st.